Alright, in this second video we will go through the steps of creating a eco project. We are assuming that you have gone through and installed iTree on a desktop computer. If you have not, you can go to the iTree website, and probably the best resource would be to go to the support page, and the video learning has a really quick video, 13 minutes or so, downloading and installing iTree Eco, which will kind of get you oriented if you haven't. But you will need Eco first installed before we can go through these next steps. So if you haven't watched the orientation video, you can do that. So let's proceed onward. Now, this is where we're going to be working. This is kind of set up specifically for a project that actually is ongoing. It's at George Washington High School. This is a Chicago Public High School in the South Side 10th Ward District, and they did some tree planting in that area around the park, and you can kind of see that's the high school. Those are some of the trees that were planted, some of the other areas around there that they planted. So it's an ongoing project in the 10th Ward, and we are just going to adapt Eco to use that for some data collection. They are also interested in collecting existing trees, and then there's other people in the 10th Ward who are interested in collecting data. Eco isn't necessarily the best tool for something like this because it's more of a tool designed for ecosystem service estimates, but we can use some of the same functions in Eco, and what we want to do is try to collect minimal amount of data and then have that available mostly for student projects, and then maybe potentially mapping. In the future, I would suggest looking at other tools like MyTree, which is an online tool and may be much more easier to use than iTree Eco. So it's kind of helpful to understand the framework of where you're going to be working. So this particular place, we know that there's tree planting done around the school, but there's also planting done in this area, which is Rowan Park. So we'll maybe break up this project, or what we call stratify it, into two sections so that we can just look at the differences between those in the estimates. So it's also helpful if we know the area of those two, and then we can use that when we create the project. So those are just things to think about before you actually start creating a project. Is how do you want to see that data? Where are you going to be working? Are you going to be expanding? Making the decisions earlier is helpful in trying to set up a project as you go forward. So one last item I wanted to mention about project planning is if you consider on expanding a project, say that the students want to work at, I believe this is an elementary school across the street, can you add that in? And you can, but that requires a lot of project management too. Once you change a project configuration, it changes some of the data collection protocols and options, so it requires a lot of coordination, but it can be done. What isn't possible is to take different iTree Eco projects, if there were multiple projects throughout, say, this 10th Ward, and then try to merge them all together. That is not something that can be done easily. It would require exporting data out and then importing it into a new master project, and because the configurations usually will be slightly different. So that's not something that can be done easily, but there are probably ways to get that done. So that's just a little bit about project planning and management before we start actually kind of creating the actual Eco project.